Y'all got time? Buddy, here we are. Buddy was wearing a rope around his neck. How many of y'all knew Buddy when he wore a rope all the time? Okay. And we love him anyway, right? So, but it was fun. It was cool, though, because really what I do, I'm not saying Buddy inspired me to do that, but it's what he did. What's what he did. He used what he loved to do to share the gospel with people. So he would walk around with this dumb rope around his neck, and people were like, what's that? And he would do rope tricks. He would do magic with the rope and stuff like that. Buddy, and he may not remember this, I started in youth ministry when I was about 21 years old. It was 1988, and Buddy did my very first youth retreat ever. I don't even remember where we went, but you did my retreat for me. You were in. I was at Trinity in Moultrie, and you were in somewhere on. Yeah, maybe so. Yeah, sure were. But let me tell y'all a fishing story on Buddy. Can I do that? Okay. So Buddy and I go fishing. He probably doesn't even remember this story. And you know how to know when a fisherman's lying, right? Y'all know how to know when a fisherman's lying? You look at him really close. This gentleman right here, perfect example. Okay? Look at him really close in the face. If his lips are moving, he's lying. Okay, y'all with me? Okay. No, so Buddy and I are fishing, right? And if you're a fisherman, you know what it's like as a bass fisherman to pull in and see a really big one, like a 10-pounder on the bed, right? So we've been fishing and we pull in and there's this 10-pounder on the bed. Well, I do what most good bass fishermen do. I scoot the edge of the front of the boat around where Buddy can't see that fish, and I'm fishing for him, right? And so I'm fishing and I can't catch this fish. It's just like something's wrong with it. And then finally the water's so clear, I notice that this fish is blind in one eye. You know, and a lot of times you can look at them and tell the eyes get the water real clear. You can tell that one eye is glazed over. And so I'm fishing, trying to catch it, and finally I'm like, well, I'm not going to be able to catch this fish. I ought to just give Buddy a shot at it, you know. So I turned the boat around to where he could see the fish, and I said, Buddy, come up here and look at that fish right there with one eye. Buddy comes up there and goes, where? I'm just kidding. That may not ever. Hey, I really appreciate y'all allowing me to be here tonight. In fact, it's neat how what God has done. We do a ministry called Go Fish. We share Christ through fishing and the outdoors. We do a lot of kids camps in the summer. That's just kind of a door that God opened up. In fact, we're in the middle of our first one this week in Preston. We were decorating today. We start tomorrow. Fortunately, we're close to home, and I'll be able to be here with you guys tonight. But we'll do 9 camps in the next 9 weeks. So after about 6, I'll need to come have a cup of coffee with you, okay, bud? But we love what we do, and God kind of changes it all the time. For about 5 or 6 years, I did this kind of thing 2-3 times a week. I was just on the road all the time, Cheryl Men's Group. And then this little thing called COVID happened, and churches just have not started doing this kind of thing again. So about a year ago, my wife and I began to pray about God filling that time. We weren't speaking as much as we used to, and we knew that God had something in store for us. And so about December this year, a lady from the Georgia Baptist Convention called me and said the guy at the BCM, Baptist Collegiate Ministries at Columbus State, was retiring, and they needed somebody part-time to come do that job. So not only do we do Go Fish Ministries, we also are the part-time campus minister at Columbus State. So if you have anybody that's there and know anybody going there, we'd love to have them be a part of that ministry. But we love sharing Christ with people. We love sharing it through fishing and the outdoors. Our theme verse is 1 Peter 4:10. It says, each one of you should use whatever gift God has given you to serve others, faithfully administering God's grace in its various forms. That's what Buddy does. Buddy does it through magic. I do it with one of these. You know, you get a guy on the boat with you for 8 hours, he got nowhere to go. So, but that's what I love to do. I grew up here in Columbus, Georgia. Went to River Road Elementary, Daniel Junior High School, Jordan High School, and that was the best 8 years of my life. No, I didn't stay that long. And then I went to the University of Georgia, and I always have loved to fish. My dad took me for the very first time. I can remember it like it was yesterday. I was probably 4 or 5 years old. He took me up to Lake Oliver. We lived about three blocks from Lake Oliver. And there's this thing called a mayfly hatch going on. Who knows what mayflies are? Y'all with me? Okay. So this is what my dad does. We have a little green Sanders runabout boat, a little tri-hull boat. And it's funny you said an 18-horse motor, because that's exactly what we had. We had an 18-horse Evinrude outboard, hand crank, hand steer. Actually, he had a steering wheel. We put the upgrade on our boat. He actually had a steering wheel. But he put me at 5 years old on the front of that runabout and pulled that thing right up into this bush. And he took a cane pole and whacked it on that bush, and all these mayflies came out and landed, just covered me. He picked them off of me, literally, put them in a cup, and that was our bait for the day. And he knew I was either going to love fishing or hate it, and I fell in love with it. That day we were catching what my dad calls 3-finger brim, which means they're about as big as those 3 fingers, but I would not stop. It was one right after the other. And then I caught my first bass at that same lake when I was about 9 years old on a Zebco 33. How many of y'all still got one of those? Okay, they still work, right? And a Shakespeare fiberglass rod and a little Clio silver spoon, about a 2-pounder. And man, I was done. I was like, this is the coolest thing I've ever done in my life. This is what I want to do. So I started reading Bassmaster and Georgia Sportsman. I started watching Bill Dance and Hank Parker and all those guys on TV. And man, I fell in love with bass fishing. I really did. That's what I wanted to do for a career. I wanted to be one of those pro guys at that point that wore the jumpsuits with patches all over them, Now you got these nice jerseys and everything, but that's what I wanted to do. And man, my talent in high school, most guys, they're either baseball players, football players. I was a little bit of a musician, but I could ride down the newly paved I-185 and be 200 yards behind a truck pulling a bass boat, and I could tell you the make and model of that bass boat. I could not pass math, but I could tell you the make and model of that bass boat. But I love everything about bass fishing. You guys that love to fish, you understand what I'm talking about. It's not just a hobby. It's like an addiction almost. You just want to be out there all the time. And when I don't catch them, it makes me want to be out there worse the next day, And I just absolutely love it. And so I learned a few things about fishing that I want to teach you guys tonight. Is that okay? Some of y'all are advanced, y'all are tournament fishermen, some of y'all don't fish at all. We're just going to do a couple of basic things tonight. Is that cool with everybody? And the other thing is we're going to have a little bit of fun. Is that okay? Okay, cool. And then I'm going to tell you how I think fishing relates to your life, because I think it relates to everybody's life. Okay, so just yell out at me. You don't have to raise your hand or anything. What's this thing I'm holding right here? Okay, a lot of people call it fishing rod. That's part of it. Okay, some people call it a fishing pole. That's not a fishing pole. Okay, fishing pole's bamboo with a string on it, right? And a hook that's way too big for what you're trying to catch usually, right? Okay, so this is a what? What was part of it? A rod, okay. This part's called the, yeah, absolutely. And you put an end between them, and it's a rod and reel. That's exactly right. And then on the end of this thing, it's an artificial bait, okay. That's what we have to fish with in tournaments. We can't fish with live bait. Fish with artificial bait, okay. Spelled L-U-R-E. How do you guys say that? No, y'all. We're from Georgia. You got to say it with 2 syllables. Lure. Y'all say it with me. Lure. Okay, it's not a lure. Okay, unless you're from Michigan, you can say it that way. Okay, you're allowed. And so what I learned was with my rod and reel and lure, when I started fishing tournaments in high school, is to be a good tournament fisherman, to be a good fisherman in general, you need to be a good caster. Okay, that's one of the basics. You need to be able to be accurate in your casting, okay? So I learned 3 kinds of cast I want to teach you guys tonight, okay? The first one is going to be a little difficult in here, even though it is a high ceiling, okay? The first one is the one most people know, okay? It's called an overhead. What's it called? Okay, now, you're going to find out tonight bass fishermen are pretty simple people, okay? The reason we call it overhead is because why? We cast it over our heads, okay? So if I were standing and there was a higher ceiling, it would be like this. I would cast it just like this, over my head, and it goes just where I point it, right? So what kind of cast is that? Overhead, exactly. Now, that cast is good for covering like a lot of water, covering long distances. If I'm bombing a rattle trap out there, stuff like that, that's a good cast. It's the cast everybody needs to learn. And it's better than this sidearm thing that a lot of people try to do, because the sidearm's just harder, okay? It's harder to let go at the right time and get it to be accurate, okay? Now, the second one I want to teach you is you take out about 10 or 12 feet of line. Let's just say we're going to Lake Eufaula, and we're way up the river, and it's early spring, and it's muddy, and I know the fish are up there in what he called dirt deep, okay? They're in a foot and a half, 2 foot of water, and they're around all these stumps, okay? First of all, let's get basic. Does everybody in the room know what a stump is? Okay, y'all with me? Okay, because no kidding, I did a seminar at Columbus High School with the smartest kids in town one time, and this kid raised his hand and asked me what a stump was. Okay, so I had to explain the anatomy of a stump, but y'all all know what a stump is, right? So let's say I'm pulling into this back of this cut at Lake Eufaula. I know all these big ones live around these stumps. Well, I don't want to do that big overhead cast because it's going to plunk down in the water and spook these fish. So I'm going to pull out about 10 or 15 feet of line, okay? And I'm just going to flip it right at that stump right there and let it fall in. And I'm just going to engage my reel and just shake that lure right there, right? So if I don't get a bite, I can just pick it right back up and I can flip it right there. And I can go all the way down that stump row, flipping that lure in there. You know, if that's a root right there, I can flip it right over on that root, just shake it just like that. If I get a bite, I set the hook and he's right there. Now, since we're flipping it in there, guess what we call that cast? A flip. That's exactly right. We ain't real complicated people, okay? So the first one, because I'm casting it over my head, it's an, okay? And because I flipped that one, it's a, very good. Y'all are getting 100, okay? Now, the last one, I actually want to teach you how I learned this cast. And this is my favorite cast, okay? It's called a pitch. What's it called? Kind of like in baseball. A pitch is a combination of the flip and the cast. It's an underhanded cast, okay? And I learned this cast, actually my sister, when I was in middle school, helped me learn this. I would trade her out Barbie and Ken time for casting practice, okay? And this is how I learned this cast. So, but I'm going to need somebody to help me out, to volunteer, so I can teach you guys how I learned this cast. Who'd be willing to volunteer? Anybody? Anybody? Nobody? I'm going to volunteer somebody. All right, come on, man. Tell everybody your name. Everybody say, hey, Carlton. All right, yeah, Carlton didn't know he was going to be in for this tonight, so Carlton's going to help me out. So, Carlton, here, you're going to play the part of my sister for just a second, okay, by holding this hat for me. And this is how I want you to hold it. Would he be better up here, or could y'all see him better in the aisle right there? Probably in the aisle. Okay, so I'm going to get you to go in the aisle and hold it just like this, okay? Now, here's what I would do, okay? Now, remind me of your name again right here? Yes. Jesse? Jackson, okay. I want you to catch this, okay? You ready? You sure? Okay. And I want you to look at Carlton, and it's just a very simple yes or no question. Is there a hook in that lure? I promise it's not a trick question. Is there a hook in it? No. Okay, so there's no hook. Okay. So here's what I need you to do. Back up about 3 more steps. That's good right there. And what I would do is I figured the way that hat's sitting, and he's perfect right against you, my sister would stand there and hold that hat. And so I would take this lure, and I'd learn how to cast it underhand. And I figure if I could put it in that hat or get it close to that hat pretty regularly, that's the size of the tops of those stumps, right? So I'm going to become an accurate caster if I could do that. So that's what I do. I just pitch it just like that till I could get it in that hat almost every. Did y'all see that? It went right in the first time. Okay. So it doesn't always happen that way, okay? And so that's what I would do. I'd do it over and over and over and over again till I became pretty accurate. Well, you know how you are. Like if you throw a football and you hit a guy at 50 yards, you're kind of proud of that, right? Yeah, that's a good throw. So I'd tell my friends, hey, man, come watch what I could do. But where I lived in Murray Hills in Columbus, Georgia, I had a bunch of friends that I called smack talkers. Y'all got any smack talking friends? Okay. And they'd be like, that ain't no big deal. If I stood in my backyard 3 hours a day, I could probably do that too. So a friend of mine and I, Carlton, and you're going to be my friend, came up with a cast to kind of shut these guys up, okay? So we're going to make it just a little bit more difficult. So here's what you're going to do for me. I need you to spread your legs apart. Yep, that's perfect. And lower that hat about 4 inches. No, that's a little too low. Yeah, right there is good. Just a little higher. About that much lower. Right there. Okay, now what we're going to do, Carlton, is I'm going to attempt to pitch this over your shoulder, make it come between your legs and go in the hat. You with me? Okay, awesome. Now, this is how you guys are going to help us, okay, to make him and me a little bit more nervous, okay? I want y'all just take these 2 fingers right here, and on the chair in front of you, the chair behind you, just do a little drum roll. We're going to see if we can have some fun right here. Now, the other thing I forgot to tell you is you got to cock your head sideways like that. Yep. Like a school picture. Isn't that what you felt like in school picture? Man, I look good, okay? Lower that hat about 1 inch. Perfect. All right, here we go. We're going over his shoulder between his legs and in the hat. Y'all ready for this? All right, we're going over his shoulder between his legs and in the hat. Yeah. Oh, got you again. All right, come on up here, man. Y'all give him a big hand clap. That was great. I appreciate that. Thanks for your help. I'm going to give you something for helping me out, too. That's a big bite bait college crawl. You know what to do with that, don't you? Okay, awesome. And why do I do that? It really has nothing to do with anything. I just like watching guys' eyes when I tell them I'm going to do that. That's why he told you there was no hook, so we were good, right? But, man, I love everything about fishing. I love the game of it. I love being out there early and seeing all those red and green running lights when boats are about to take off, you know. I love the smell of carbon monoxide from 250 horsepower outboard motors and, you know, and stale biscuits at Jack Wingett's Lunker Lodge at Lake Seminole. And I just love everything about it. And over the years that I fished, and I fished a lot of years, I've had some pretty cool experiences, okay? And I'm going to tell you all the story. I've fished all the way from Canada to South Florida. I've not been way out west, but I've been a pretty good ways out west. I've even fished for piranha in Peru on a mission trip before. Man, you talk about being humbled. This was hilarious. I go up there, and I'm bringing my rods and reels, you know, and I'm catching these. I want to catch peacock bass. That's what everybody wants to catch down there, but we're not in the right area, so I'm like, what can you catch? And they're through the interpreter, well, you can catch piranha. I'm like, oh, I can do that. I've read about that or I've watched that on YouTube. So I get a little hook, and I get a little wire leader, and, man, I'm catching them. I mean, it's easy. All you got to do is put dead meat down there, and, you know, it's one right after the other. So that night, I literally fed the village we were staying in. We caught like 40 or 50 of these fish, and there was only 10 people in the village. So I'm feeling pretty good about myself. Well, the next day, I walked down to the shore, and there's a little Peruvian girl. She couldn't have been more than 5 or 6 years old. Little, tiny little thing, sitting cross-legged on the bank by the river. And she had the carcass of an old dead fish, right? She puts her hand down like this and does this, and a piranha jumps in her hand, and she catches it. I'm like, yeah, I'm something, aren't I? Yeah. But I love that. I love all those experiences that we get to have as fishermen. I've got a friend that's got a place in Maine on a river called the Penobscot River, and we get to go every year, and we catch like 100 smallmouth a day. And it's a privilege God's given me because I have these friends that have these places. It's just awesome. But one of my favorite and most memorable trips is just not far from here. It's on a river called the Flint River. How many of y'all know where the Flint River is? You've probably driven across it a bunch of times. And so we do these things called float trips. If you've never been on a float trip, you go with a group of guys and you put in at one bridge and you take out at another bridge. You leave a couple cars on one end, take a couple cars to the other, and I had never done this before. So a friend of mine named Jim Pass, and you all know Jim Pass? Okay, he's a good guy, he's a good fisherman, but he's like most other fishermen I just told y'all about, and you know, you believe about that much. So they said, so we have a unique fish that lives on the Flint River called a shoal bass, okay? It looks a little bit like a largemouth, a little bit like a smallmouth, but it only grows in that river. The Flint River, they've since kind of gotten into the Okmulgee River and some in the Chattahoochee, but that's their native river. And they fight hard, and they are fun to catch, and they live right in the current, and you have to use little small boats to catch them. And so this particular day, I'd never done this before. 5 of my friends, there were 6 of us total, we set out to do a float trip on the Flint River. And so this was the crew that we had. We had Jim Pass and his partner, Jim Bunton. Some of y'all may remember Jim Bunton. He was a Columbus High School principal. He was, I think, superintendent of schools. But anyway, these two guys, they're famous because they know the first 5 words of about 500 country songs. That's all they know, the first 5 words. But that's what you'll hear them going down the river. All my exes live in Texas. That's all they know. They go to the next song, you know. And then we had another guy that was a forester, and we had my pastor, and then another guy that was our church, just a friend. And we had 3 boats, 2 guys per boat. Y'all like that Georgia math? Okay. 3 boats, 6 guys, 2 per boat. One of them was what we call a canoe. Okay, a canoe is a fiberglass canoe, flat bottom with a flat back. Okay. The problem with the canoe that we had, which we didn't know until we put it in the water, was it had a crack all the way down the hull from the front to the back, okay? And when we got there, we realized, Jim and Jim realized they left the plug at home. Well, their remedy was put a stick in it, okay? That's what we did. So we had that boat. Then we had a regular canoe. The guy that was with us, named Dixon, had a regular canoe. And then we had this thing that I call a push me, pull me. It's a Coleman Cricket. How many of y'all ever seen one of these boats? Okay, you buy them at Walmart, you buy them at J.C. Penney's where we used to buy them. It's about a 14-foot boat that's flat on both ends, made out of this thin plastic. It actually does this in the water, but you can put a trolling motor on either end or both ends if you want to. It goes either way you want it to. That's why I call it a push me, pull me. Well, Jim and Jim love to eat fish. So Jim and Jim were in the little push me, pull me with all their fishing tackle and a cooler that was about half the size of the boat. It was like a 128-quart cooler because they want to keep all these fish that we're catching, right? So here we go. We set off at 4:30 in the morning, go to the Flint River, and get ready and start fishing. So we put in, and I didn't know at the time that there's a gauge on the bridge that shows you what the water level is. And if there's a certain water level, you probably don't want to do a 12-mile float, right, which was what we were doing this day. Well, I didn't know any better. I just got in the boat. I just want to go fishing, you know. So we get in the boat, and we all partnered up, and we start down the river, and we start fishing. Well, we're having a great time. We're catching fish. We're switching partners every once in a while. You know, whoever gets the canoe has to pull over to the bank about every hour and bail all the water out of it, you know, because of the crack and the hull and all that stuff. And so we have had the most awesome day. Been catching fish, been hanging out with friends, been eating Vienna sausages and crackers all day. You know, just a sportsman's dream. You know, just hadn't gotten any snake bites. Everything was awesome. Well, it gets about 6 o'clock, and my friend Jim says this: we probably ought to go a little bit faster. We're halfway. Okay, y'all do the math with me, okay? We've been 6 miles in 10 hours, and we got to get home before dark. So I said to Jim, I was like, Jim, when were you thinking about telling us? Oh, about right now. So we pull all our rods and reels in. Now, here's how it worked. When you had a partner in the boat with you, one of you was the steering guy in the back, right? And one of you was the navigator in the front, because every once in a while on the Flint River you come to these shoals, right? And you have to navigate through the rocks, and you get through to the other side and you fish, right? That's how it works. So I had picked up Mr. Jim Bunton, and he was my navigator. Well, the problem was we didn't communicate how we were going to navigate with each other because there was a pointing system, right? Whoever's in the front of the boat, they either point one or the other way. They point, this is the way to go, or they point, there's a rock, turn the boat. Y'all with me? So you can understand why it would be important to know his navigation system, right? So Jim jumps in the front of my boat. He's the navigator. I'm the guy steering the boat from the back. And we start down through this set of shoals, and he points. Well, I think he's pointing, go this way. Well, he's not. He's pointing, there's a rock. So I turn the boat, boom, right into this rock, and it came up through the bottom of that canoe. Yeah. So now we got a hole in our boat about this big. I mean, it's just unusable at this point, right? And it's about 6:30 or 7 o'clock, right? And so I said, well, I guess the two of us get to get in the middle of these other boats. Now, y'all remember the description of the other two boats, right? The one with the 128-quart cooler and then the regular canoe. And most of the guys are my size or bigger, okay? So I jump in the middle of the canoe. Jim jumps on top of the cooler in the other boat, and we go through the next set of rapids. And I said, you guys got to stop. I am not doing that again. I saw my life flash before me sitting in the middle of that canoe going through those rapids. I said, we got to do something different. Well, this guy named Dixon, he's a forester. He said, look, I know what y'all could do. He said, you see those big power poles? There's a big power poles with 30 power lines on the big metal ones, you know, that have the stands. He said, those will cross Highway 19 to the left down here in about a mile. You get on Highway 19, hang a right, and you'll be at the bridge where we're going to take out in about a mile. I was like, well, I'll take that option. So I'm going to take off hiking, and I'll meet you guys in just a minute. Got a cell phone, we're good, right? Okay. My pastor, who was with us at the time, said, hey, I'm going to take that option also. He didn't enjoy sitting in the middle of a boat very much either because he was the smaller of the guys. So we take off hiking, and we hike up this hill, and I remember it like it was yesterday, watching those guys going off into the sunset. And all I hear is, all my exes live in Texas, as they go around the corner. So I said, okay. So we take off. I've got a backpack that has the important stuff in it, a roll of toilet paper, some Vienna sausages, my cell phone, a bottle of water, and I think I had a flashlight. And that was what I had. And we were wet and dirty, been on the river all day, smell like fish, and Vienna sausages, some kind of combination of that. And we start to hike. So we go down, and these power poles sit on top of the hills, right? So between these little valleys between the power poles is about 3/4 of a mile, maybe a mile. So we hike down this hill and hike back up to the top, fully expecting when we get to the top of the next hill to see Highway 19 when we get to the top of that hill, right? So when we get there, guess what we see? Yeah, not Highway 19. It was another hill. That's exactly right. And by this time, it's about 8:30, 8:45. It's almost dark. And we're hiking. I said, okay, it's probably the next one. So, 25, 30 minutes later, we get to the top of the next hill. There's no Highway 19. And I'm starting to say not very nice things about Dixon, who's the forester that's supposed to know this land, right? So we did this for about an hour and a half, going down and up and down and up, and there's never a highway. In fact, it's starting to get dense woods, and it's pitch black dark at this point. I do have my little tiny $1 Walmart flashlight with me, and we can see about 8 foot in front of us. And then that's when things start to happen. You start to hear things like coyotes and, moccasins scooching through the grass and dinosaurs and whatever else lives out there, And I look at my pastor, I'm like, man, what are we going to do? He's like, I'm not sure. Well, what we realized was every time we came to the top of a hill, there was a road, okay? So I said, well, let's get to the top of this hill, and wherever that road's going, the road's got to go somewhere, right? Let's follow this road. So we take off following this dirt road, and we follow it and follow it and follow it and follow it. And finally, we come to this field. It ends up in this field, and the road goes left and the road goes right. And there's a sign right there that says, it tells who the land company is that owns it, and there's an 800 number. And I'm like, well, we're good now. I'm gonna call this number, and they'll know where we are, and maybe they can send the sheriff out to find us because we have no clue, And at this point, I'm thinking about my family and my kids, and I'm not going to make it home, I'm not Bear Grylls. I ain't good at this stuff, right? And so I pull out my phone. Well, what I didn't realize was my fancy waterproof bag called a Ziploc bag had come open when I was in the water, and my phone was dead. So we couldn't call. So we turn right. We go about a 1/4 mile, and that road just dead ends into a hayfield. By this time, it's almost midnight. And so this is kind of a side note to this story. I turned to my preacher. I said, don't you think maybe we ought to pray? Isn't that how we get sometimes? Let's pray when there's no other option, right, at this point. So we prayed, and so we turned around. I said, well, the only other thing to do is to go the other way. Let's go the other direction on this road because it's got to go somewhere. So we start walking, and we start walking, and then I noticed the road, and I've been on enough dirt roads in my life that I realized, hey, this is starting to have some wear to it. Somebody's actually been on this road. And then we start to go, and then there's some gravel. Somebody's actually worked on this road, And then finally, at about 12:30 in the morning, I see a light up through the woods. And I said, hey, man, if that's a house, we're saved. We're good. If it's one of those little electrical box things, I'm not going to be very happy, right? So we walk up, and sure enough, there's a gate across the road, and there's this little tiny house at the end of the road. And so we start to walk up, and we're nasty, dirty, stinky, wet. And I look at my preacher. He goes, you want to knock on the door or you want me to? I said, I want you to. You're the preacher. You're the holy man. Can you do it for me? So he knocks on the door, and we hear these footsteps come. And this little old man, I say little old man, literally a little tiny elderly gentleman opens the door about this far. And you can imagine what we look like, And so my pastor explains the whole situation to him, and he goes, hang on just one second. He closes it. You hear the thing latch back, And then I hear footsteps again, and a much larger, much younger man comes to the door, and it's his son. He's about 6'4" and weighs about 260 and worked for the Talbot County Sheriff's Department. And we tell him the whole story, and luckily I think we look pitiful enough that he believed us. And he let us come in. I said, look, I need to call my friends. They're going to be worried sick about us. It's almost 1 in the morning. They've probably been off the water for a long time. So I had to call Jim's wife because my phone was dead. Nobody remembers phone numbers, right? So I had to call his wife to tell her the whole story to get his phone number. So I called Jim. I said, man, here's the whole story, because I thought by now they'd called the Coast Guard and the sheriff and everybody else, and they thought we were dead. And so I tell him the whole story, and then I say to him, I said, well, where are y'all? This is what he says. We're still on the river. I said, are you kidding me? He said, no, we didn't realize how low it was. We've been dragging these boats for about a half an hour. I'm like, great job, man. Appreciate that prep time, buddy. So this gentleman and his super nice son take us, and they actually take us through Talbotton, took us through the drive-thru at Burger King and got us some Whoppers, which is always important for survival, right? And then they took us to the Highway 19 and 41 bridge, which is where we're taken out, and they let us out. And we sat there for probably 30, maybe 45 minutes, and I look up the Flint River, and I see this light, just barely. They'd had their flashlights on forever. It was barely orange. It was flickering, and as they got closer, I'm listening, and I hear it again. Oh, my ex. They're still singing, coming down the river. So we take the boats out, and we get up, and this is not even the end of the story. We get to the Po Biddy Road. How many know where the Po Biddy Road is? And that's where we put in. We get there, get all the canoes, get guys put into different trucks, and Jim Bunton says, somebody stole all my gas. Somebody had siphoned the gas out of his truck while we were on this adventure. And I said, okay, I think in Talbotton, we were in Thomaston with the Burger King. In Talbotton, there's a Piggly Wiggly where they leave the pumps on all night. We'll follow you and see if we can get you there and get you some gas. So we get there, get him some gas pumped, and exactly 24 hours from when I left my house, at 4 in the morning, I got back home. Now, and that still ain't the end of the story. The next day I woke up, it's the story that just keeps giving and giving. I had chigger bites from my ankle to my thigh. I bet I had 500 of them. I had to go get a shot because it was so bad. It was unbelievable. And I told my preacher it was his fault because he hadn't prayed enough about the trip. Okay? But why did I tell you that? And I love adventures like that. Didn't particularly like it that much that night, right? And I have not done that particular float trip again. I've done some shorter ones. But what was it about that night that I wanted to tell you guys? Here's what I want you to get from that story. When we came out of that road from that field and we started up that hill, that night I was convinced that light saved my life. I really thought, man, if I have to stay out here any longer, I don't know if I'm going to make it or not. Probably nothing would have happened. But that's what in your mind, that's what's going on. Man, I'm not going to make it. And that light saved my life. Now, the reason I'm here tonight is to tell you guys that you are that exact same light. You are the light that saves lives. Let me read you a scripture that tells you that. I'm not just making it up, okay? Matthew. This is Matthew chapter 5. And I can't even see the number, buddy. I don't have my readers on, okay? But it says this. I think it's verse 13. Verse 14. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bushel. Instead, they put it on a stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light so shine before others that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father who is in heaven. You see, you guys who know Christ, you are what this whole world is looking for. This crazy world that when you flick on the TV or you look on the internet and you think, man, where in the world is our world gone? They're looking for what you've got. They're looking for that light. And so there's two groups of you I want to talk to tonight, and then I'm going to be done with my time. You need to give two things, okay? First of all, if you're here tonight and you've never given your life to Christ for the first time, to be that light, you got to have that light. You see, before Jesus told us that we were the light of the world, he says, guess what? I'm the light of the world. And if you'll have a relationship with me, I'm paraphrasing it, that you'll no longer walk in darkness. That's what he says. And it's kind of like a trip I took with my son one time. My son loves to fish. He's actually just graduated high school. But when he was a little bitty guy, I did the exact same thing to him my dad did to me. I put him in that boat. I put him up in those mayflies. I whacked on the bush. Mayflies came out and landed on him, and we caught fish. But I'd take him with it. He's my little buddy. He's 4 years old, 3 the first time I took him. And I had a Spider-Man life jacket I'd put him. So we had this process. We'd pull up to Lake Oliver. I'd put him in the boat. I'd put his life jacket on him. I'd unhook the boat, get everything ready, back the boat in, tie it up to the dock, drive up, park the boat, come back. He'd be there waiting on me, right? We did it 10 or 12 times a year, right? So this particular day, I do it. I pull up. Oh, and I pay my launch fee. I always pay my launch fee, okay? So I pull up, pay my launch fee, unhook the boat, put my son in the boat, put his life jacket on, back the boat in, put it up to the dock, drive off, and come back. But this particular day, usually my son's looking up, hey, Daddy, do it. I look, and my son's sitting in the seat looking down like this. I'm like, what is it, buddy? And he said, Daddy, is there supposed to be water coming in the bottom of the boat right here? Probably not. And I had missed the first and most important step of putting my boat in the water, and that's what? Who's done that before, okay? Guys, we do that a lot of times as men in church. We miss step one, okay? We think, well, my family grew up in church. I came to church all my life. I've been in church. I'm a Christian. Nothing about this building makes you a Christian, y'all. Being a Christian is about admitting that you're a sinner, telling Jesus you believe what he did for you on the cross, and asking him to come and live in your heart and be Lord of your life, okay? That's step one. That's me giving my life to Christ so that I can have the light, okay? So if you've never done that, I want to give you the opportunity tonight to do that. I'm not going to make you raise your hand or come up front or do anything. But if you realize, man, maybe I missed step one. Maybe I missed putting the plug in the boat. If you want to have an opportunity to do that tonight, I want to give you that opportunity. Okay, so I'm going to pray really quickly. And if you want to ask Christ into your heart for the first time, you can just repeat this simple prayer after me. The Bible says, if you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart God raised him from the dead, you'll be saved. It's just as simple as that. And so I'm going to pray, and if you want to pray this same prayer and ask Christ into your heart, you just repeat this prayer after me. You can repeat it out loud if you want to. You can repeat it in your heart. These words are not magic words. It's just helping me help you voice to God what you desire, and that's a relationship with him. So you guys bow your heads and close your eyes. And if you'd like to ask Christ into your heart for the first time, you just pray something really simple like this. Dear God, I know I'm a sinner. I believe your son Jesus died on the cross for me. I believe he rose again the third day. Would you forgive me of my sins? I turn away from my sin back to you. Would you come and live in my heart and be Lord of my life? In Jesus' name, amen. What I am going to ask you to do is, if you just prayed that prayer with me, would you find Buddy or some of his staff or some of your friends that are here that are Christ followers and say, hey, man, I prayed that prayer with that guy tonight. So they can kind of help you know the next steps to take in your walk with Jesus. Now, I'm fully aware that most of you guys have probably already done that because you're sitting here with me on a Tuesday night at church eating barbecue, okay? If you have given your life to Christ, it is your privilege. In fact, it's really Christ's command to you to share that love with other people. And so I just wanted to encourage you in that tonight, that you are the light of the world. You're what this world is looking for. The guys that work around you that talk like they probably ought not talk, that talk about their wives like they probably ought not to, that talk about the things they've done last weekend, what they don't realize is they're searching for what you've got. okay? And Buddy is going to provide opportunities for you to bring guys here and go, hey, come eat barbecue with me, so that they can hear that good news that is Jesus Christ, okay? It doesn't have to be you learning the Romans road and you witnessing and you sharing your testimony, and all that stuff's awesome, and you need to learn that. But it can be as simple as you're having a heart knowing that that guy doesn't know Jesus and going, hey, come with me and have some barbecue. Hey, come with me and listen to this guy on Sunday morning. He's pretty good, okay? Buddy wants to give you those opportunities. And then my last encouragement to you is this, okay? Buddy loves to do magic. I love to do fishing. What is it in your life that you love to do? Maybe it's fishing. Maybe it's hunting. Maybe, heaven forbid, it's golf. Never understood that, but hey, if you like it, not going to hold it against you, okay? But the things that you love to do, begin to look around you and go, hey, man, this is my mission field. I already speak these people's language. You know, I speak Bass Speak. Okay, he speaks Bass Speak. We know what a Carolina rig and a Texas rig and an Alabama rig is. We know what a 7'6" medium heavy flipping stick is, and an 8.1 to 1 gear ratio reel is, and 250 horsepower high output motor. Right? I speak that language because I love that game, and it gives me the opportunity to share Jesus with those guys. Who is around you that share those same interests that you can go, hey, I need to build a relationship with that guy for the specific purpose of sharing Jesus with him. I appreciate you guys listening tonight. I appreciate you allowing me to eat great food with you and fellowship with you and share a couple of stories with you, and I'd like to pray for you before we go tonight, okay? God, thank you for these men that have given up their time tonight to be together, to be with you, to dig into your word just a little bit, Father. And so I pray that you will encourage their hearts. God, I pray if there is somebody here that prayed to receive you for the first time tonight, that they would make that known to Buddy or to a friend, because that's the best decision they'll ever make. And then, God, would you also help us to realize what a privilege it is to be the light of the world. And so help us not to hide that, but to share it with others. God, we love you and we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. Oh, one shameless plug. One of the things that we get to do, one of the privileges that we have as our ministry is we do a Christian-based fishing television show. It's called Tight Line Fishing Television. It comes on CTN every Saturday morning at 10:30 if you get Dish or DirecTV. The easiest way to watch them, though, is on YouTube. If you got gray hair, ask your grandkids how to get on YouTube, okay? But that's where everybody watches TV now. Y'all with me? And we've done 3 seasons. We're filming season 4 now. If you got guys that love to fish that are friends of yours that don't know Christ, this is what we do. We teach very specific techniques every show. Sometimes it's bass fishing. Sometimes it's saltwater. It's mostly bass fishing. But in the middle of every show, I do about a 2 or 3 minute devotion that relates to something in the show, and we share the gospel every show. So if you got friends that like fishing, send them to our show, and they'll hear the gospel, okay? All right, thanks. Appreciate you.